did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
And howdy-ho, friends and neighbors. It's your friendly neighborhood idiot, Steve Asher, here at the House of Asher. Got a kind of a cool show. I think they're all cool, and it's not because I'm doing them, it's because I'm lucky enough to get some really great guests on. This is actually episode 89 of the series, and you're probably listening to us on Spreaker, if you're listening to live, or not. If you are, feel free to jump in the chat room. But you can also follow us on YouTube under House of Asher podcast. Feel free to check out stevieasher.com, which we can find out about the show, my new books, which I actually have one I got to plug. I'm sorry, I'm shameless. I'm that way. Hauntings of the St. Vincent's Academy. It just come out on ebook and shortly in paperback, probably by the end of the day. Go to Amazon, live it, love it, make it a part of yourself. But I'm a conspiracy guy. I love history. I love mud. I'm from Western Kentucky. Of course, I'm gonna love mud. A lot of clay earth here, and what we're going to get into is something known as the Great Mudflood Conspiracy, and we will be hitting that right back after this short break. Robert Regie, a Peoria, Illinois native, is a psychic medium with over 50 years experience within the paranormal field, in addition to the 35 years experience as a forensic psychologist. Robert has been involved in 2 exorcisms, both sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago. Regie is a mentor of 10 children of the paranormal, instructing them, teaching them in the ways of their gifts and their talents and how to use them most wisely. Robert volunteers at a hospice, ministering to the children and their families, seeing to their needs. He assists these young children in their transition from this earthly dimension to the heavenly dimension. Mr. Regie's mantra is, we are all spiritual beings in a physical body. Robert Regie talks to the children about the angels that are always around them in times of need. All of the services he does are always free of charge. Robert is available for both public and private events. He has given many readings in person as well as over the telephone. Mr. Regie has been on many podcasts, such as House of Asher, Trapper John Touched by Heaven, as well as several programs in the United Kingdom. If you need any assistance or information concerning anything paranormal, he urges you to please contact him at 309-213-0325.
This is Beta Callisto with Trauma Team. You can find me in Shakespeare Shitstorm, and you are listening to House of Asher.
All right, we are back. Had to do a little housekeeping, got to keep the lights on, ladies and gentlemen, but the time is here. The time is, well, let's talk about a time that's forgotten, and that's what we're going to do here right now. My friend Josh Schmitt, dear Josh Schmitt, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Hey, man, like I said, I know you've done some stuff before, and it's pretty loose. It's just like I said, a couple of bros just hanging out. So let's wrap, man. I'm really new to this. I have come to this actually through the Facebook group that you're a part of, which I don't know if you run it or if you're just a member of it, but talking about the mud flood theory and the mud flood conspiracy. How did you come across this, man?
Well, honestly, this is very new to me as well. I first heard about this. I don't know if you're familiar with Max Egan. He does a really good podcast on YouTube. Yeah, I think it's called The Crow House. But he was mentioning this, I would probably say, 6-7 months ago. He started talking about this mud flood, this event that happened maybe only a few hundred years ago. And there are traces of this all over the world, but then it's just been completely eradicated from history. So I first heard it on his podcast. I'm like, and it just kind of stuck in the back of my head. Well, that's kind of weird. What is a mud flood? What is this? So, like most things, that stick in the back of my head, I have to dig into them at some point. And so basically the only way you can research this is by looking through old photographs. So what I started to do was just started researching photographs from like the 1800s, mid 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, just looking for this evidence of this so-called event. And basically the best way to find evidence is old buildings. And what we were finding when we were looking at old pictures is that a lot of these old buildings were basically buried. And they had to retrofit the buildings, build stairs up to the second floor, build a new doorway up there, and then kind of go on with life as it may be. But yeah, that's basically how it started, is just looking at old pictures. And actually what I did is I started first sharing things on Twitter. And that wasn't really the best place to share a lot of photos, so I started the Mudflood and Hidden History page on Facebook. And then just started gaining some traction. It was crazy.
Well, again, we were all educated, indoctrinated, whatever you want to call it. And, as of this moment in time, as far as I know, the Earth is round. As far as I know, I knew there were different extinctions and different things like that. But, and they talk about stuff like the great, when they had the big dust bowl, and supposedly it was bad to poor farming and all this and that. And everything was covered in dust, and everything was, a product of mismanagement of crops and soil rotation and crop rotation, which I thought they had that locked down for centuries. I mean, if you go back to early Iroquois and different Native American stuff, they talk about the Three Sisters, how you change them out. So it kind of looked kind of shaky there, but I know different things touch on flat Earth and different things like that. But so, what is your understanding? I know it also ties in with Tartan, the empire of, it's pronounced Tardia, right? Or
Tartaria. Yeah. I don't really know how you pronounce it, to be honest. There's so many different words flying around right now, but I think it's Tartaria.
Tomato.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll say what I understand of it, and then you can add to it or amend, whatever. Supposedly, in that region, which covered most of China, I guess all of Russia and a lot of that northern section, the northern part of the hemisphere, was a large empire. And as we know, most people think of Tartans, they touch on like the Mongolian bloodline and things like that. But it was more than that. It was a very, very powerful, very advanced group, and to the point where it was sort of like you always hear. I had a gentleman on just recently. I'm blanking his name. Just had him on. Iggy Nost, and he was talking about. They were talking about the Vedas in ancient India, and where they had different flying vehicles and different things like that. It seems like we have these extinctions and we have these dropouts, and then we're rebuilding. It's just like we have a nice sandcastle that some kid smacks it over, and then here we are putting it back together, and it's it's like, hey, look how cool our sandcastle is, not knowing that it's primitive compared to what came before us. Do you know, in regards of a little bit of the technologies, because I knew there was a crossover or a bleed over into like Tesla technologies. What do you kind of know about that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure what to think about Tesla, to be honest. He might just be someone who was inserted in history to explain all this leftover technology from this previous civilization.
Man, I never thought about it like that.
That's just speculation, but that's something that's kind of sticking in the back of my head right now. Now that this whole Tartaria thing, I'm trying to fit all this in my worldview now, and kind of hold all these different ideas and float them out there, and they're kind of stay there until you can kind of solidify them with, some truth. But yeah, it looks like they may have had some kind of advanced energy tech focused around atmospheric electricity, using, different frequencies like cymatic technologies, maybe associated with the ringing of church bells, maybe a way of maybe sending this energy out. It's hard to say because we really don't know. We're all just trying to figure this out right now, to be honest.
Well, how we're all educated, and I don't want to come off, and I'm gonna, I don't mean to. I mean, I'm not, I don't have tinfoil hat on and all this, and have like a board with all the, the yarn strings and whatnot. But it is a thing that we know full well through Freedom of Information Act that, governments can and will and have and probably are still doing different type of either experimentation, indoctrination, steering of certain, well, not just their own people, of other governments, and trying to destabilize certain areas. And so, I mean, I don't think there's anybody around at this point, unless they just have blinders on, that says, if something of such a magnitude happened, that it couldn't be covered up. But my question is, okay, let's say this happened, and we're trying to rebuild out of this. Why was it covered up? Is that because a select few who maybe had rediscovered it or hadn't lost that power? Are they trying to kind of dumb down the population? Are they kind of a breakaway civilization? Are they here among us? Or are they, elsewhere?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think that may be where all these secret societies kind of come into play, where they may have, this hidden knowledge of when these cataclysms happen, and it may be that it happens on a set schedule. I know in the past I've looked into like ice core samples, and it shows like the different, trends of, what's happened here over, well, who knows how long, because honestly, the whole history timeline is in question right now for me. But I think when these events happen, these people kind of come out and then assume control and kind of make the world in their own image to some degree. And I guess whoever's left, they can either just remove those who, don't want to go along with the game. And then it's easy to indoctrinate children. And that kind of goes into where these orphan trains went out all over the country in the mid-1800s, which are very strange. They were basically just giving kids away.
Well, see, that makes me think of, again, everything secular. You remember when Hitler was trying to make like the perfect race of people, and he would get kids from Austria and different places. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the band ABBA, but I believe it was the dark-haired lady that was in ABBA was one of those children. I'm blanking on the correct pronunciation. But basically they were adopted out, given to German, Reich, positive, approved families, or whatever that means, to be raised into that as, be it breeding stock, be it fighters, be it, and basically none of their history applied. And even if they had knew their parents, say when they were 2 or 3 years old, by the time they're 7, 8 years old, all that's a memory, all that's gone, all that's wiped. And they may have even used, virgining mind control techniques, drug techniques, kind of Stockholm syndrome, all this different crap to work on people to have them lose that. And, you start touching on stuff, if they were as advanced, the Tartans or Tartarians, as it's speculated that they are, if they could do all this and make these great structures using like radio waves and vibrations and things like that, obviously I would figure the human mind would be tinker toys.
Yeah, you would think so. But then I know military tech has that ability today. I mean, I think it was in the maybe the 70s where they were able to literally put a person's voice inside another person's head through some kind of sonic weaponry. I guess they called it the voice of God at the time, or maybe they still do. And I think that was used in the Iraq War as well.
Well, let me ask you this: you threw out a podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Solaris Blue Raven. She hosts a show, Witching Hour and Hyperspace, and I think it's like CKOR. Anyway, real sweet lady, very knowledgeable, and she supposedly had been part of some of that different experimentation back in the day. You hear about certain people, they are abducted as children because their minds are more pliable, they're more able to absorb and deal with the wear and tear of social and mental conditioning. And again, I'm only going on what I'm being told. I don't know if this is for fact. I mean, I knew that different experimentation did happen on kids. It's just a fact. But had mentioned the talking into people's heads. You know, like back in the days when you'd see somebody walking up down the street. Well, you're thinking, well, this guy's crazy, or he did too much acid, or whatever. He's, you know, having to go to the store and he's bitching because I can't believe she wants me to get out here on Saturday, but you don't hear what he's saying. You think he's talking to himself. And
Right.
but it could be these technologies. But which you were talking about, you know, the military has these things now. How closely do you think it is connected to that tech, or do you think it is a bit more or less, again, reinventing the wheel, or do you think certain people in power never lost it?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of all that. I don't think there's anything new right now, technology-wise, that hasn't been here before at some point. That includes all the touchscreen stuff and all the internet and all this stuff. I think it's probably existed before. Maybe it never went away in some circles. You never know.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I think about stuff because, like I said, we do a lot with special needs children and things like that, and so different technologies, like where they can look at a screen and they can read out their nonverbal. Wonderful blessings, right? Wounded warriors with different I don't want to say cybernetics, but prosthetics that react to very mild muscle influences. Some are saying that they are going to get it to where they can mentally tell your hand to close and open. And I don't know if maybe they are doing a slow feed of all this technology to slowly catch us up or whatever, to just keep us. It's almost like, are they keeping us just at the level where we're controlled, childlike, but we're improving to keep up with the needs of the oligarchy or whatever, like the tech, the companies in charge or the people in charge, or the shadowy man behind the curtain. What I wonder is if you feel any of that's true, and does that scare the crap out of you? Because I know it does me. I'm a granddad now, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, what's the future going to hold for these kids? Which I'm sure that's true of every parent and every grandparent. But where do you sit on that? I mean, where do you see more of that coming out, and that becoming more of our normal technology?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they're pushing us in a certain direction. You can always get a sense of where they're pushing the mainstream. Oh, pardon me. But they're really pushing like the 5G network right now. That's straight. That's a weapon. I mean, there's no way around that. I mean, you can do anything you want with those frequencies, and you talk about minds being tinker toys. I mean, that's game over if that's rolled out worldwide, in my opinion. If the wrong people get in control of that, if they're not already, But it seems like they're trying to almost merge humanity with machine. It's some kind of weird transhumanism. Almost like in an effort to detach the human spirit from its source, or something. I don't know, it's bizarre.
Well, like you said, start talking about transhumanism, and all right, well, let's think about it like this. If the great Tarta, empire, Tartaria, whatever, met a grizzly inn, do you feel it was self-inflicted? Do you feel it was, oh, okay, well, if it just does well at 8, let's see what it does at 11, and they just misstepped, maybe went critical with some weapon, and maybe messed up the magnetic fields or the something. I mean, what do you think caused it? Do you think it was maybe an outside force, possibly off planet?
It could have been. You do hear stories about, like, especially with Atlantis, you hear stories about they misused high-end technology, and it caused cataclysms. So you have to wonder if maybe some of those old stories were actually what happened to Tartaria. I don't know. Is it tied into any biblical events, like maybe Tower of Babel? Who knows? Really, nobody knows at this point.
Well, that's what
somebody does. They just
yeah, somebody knows what's up. But it makes you wonder a couple things. First of all, if it was one of those, like you said, kind of a Tower of Babel deal where you kind of are outgrowing your tech is outgrowing your knowledge, or I don't know how else to say it. Like more or less, your butt is outgrowing your mouth is outgrowing whatever whatever that old saying is.
Too big for your sandbox or whatever.
That's it. Yeah, getting too big for your britches, there, Pally. And then something or someone or a collective cabal or whatever kind of maybe sabotaged it, put it back, caused us to kind of recoup and go, no, they're not ready yet. What I wonder too is, okay, back then in the 1800s, where are they at now? Because even in the few years that we've had computer tech, things like that, we've jumped exponentially every few years. I mean, you get a computer and it's gone. I mean, within 6 months it's garbage. By the time it hits Walmart shelves, it's garbage. And compared to what they have, and you've talked about all these different quantum computers and different type of advanced cooling systems and biocomputers and stuff like that synced in, with living tissue, which makes me think of like those spaceships that they say that, they're all in one piece. Sometimes they talk like this is seamless. It doesn't have any rivets. It's almost like it was grown somewhere.
Right.
It's I wonder where they are at this point.
Oh, geez. You hear about these breakaway civilizations where it's almost like all the advanced tech is in use and everybody has access to it, and then we're kind of off on the side over here, and we've got basically a slavery system set up here with this false scarcity, and you got to pay to live system, and everything's upside down and backwards, and seems like it's run by evil. So there's definitely, it feels like there's another society, maybe not so far away, maybe there's some hidden land that they're all getting together on somewhere. I don't know.
Well, you hear so much about, again, man, like I said, I feel like I'm like Conspiracy Central now, and I apologize if it comes off that way. And but you hear so much about like the Hollow Earth, and you hear so much about like deep ocean bases. You always hear about different people talking about things shooting in and out and lights under the ocean and whatnot. But who's to say that some of those vibrations, they weren't able to manipulate that to where maybe there's great big cities where the desert is, maybe there's great big cities where whatever is, but because it's slightly off our vibrational plane, we can't interact with it. Almost like and it takes it back honestly to fairy lore, which, if you think about it, would be a hell of a way to, pardon my language, hell of a way to explain some of these weird advancements, and people be able to, mind control you and this and that, and they feed you something and you forget where you're at, So maybe that's a good little way to explain an unexplained technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. When we were talking about maybe a out-of-phase city, the first thing that popped to mind was all the national forests and all the private government lands. Who knows what's hidden in those giant forests and deserts, and
Well, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go.
No, I was just going to say that I don't know if you ever come down into Kentucky, especially Western Kentucky, but we have an area called Land Between the Lakes, and it was sort of a land grab for when they had when they ran electricity. They started using hydroelectric, damming up rivers and lakes and different tributaries and stuff. Did you ever watch? There was an old show or an old movie called Brother, Where Art Thou? And I don't know if you've ever seen it. Well, no. All right. Basically, it had like George Clooney in it, and they were talking about how they basically forced people off their land. The government did a land grab and pushed everybody off. Most people had very little time to grab their stuff, and they flooded the whole friggin' town, man. I'm talking, there's still actual cities half buried, or like half there under the waters, covered in silt and whatever. And when it gets low, sometimes you can maybe hit a top of an old chimney stack and things like that.
Wow.
But, like you said, when you have the anonymity and the ability to go, you can't be here, and people accept that as, oh, okay, then, out of sight, out of mind. There's no oversight. There's no transparency, and a lot of ginky, weird stuff can happen. And I've heard a lot of weird stuff has happened even in this area. I mean, I've heard about what they call them, the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases. I've heard different types of creatures. I'm not going to want to say aliens. I'm not trying to be that guy, but definitely something that does not appear to be humanoid.
Yeah, weird stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, weird stuff, man. Bigfoot, things like that, roaming the woods. Again, I've never seen one. I'm more of a ghost, paranormal type guy, but as I've done this show, I've slowly been reaching out, and you're not going to, you're going to rub shoulders with Bigfoot guys. You're going to rub shoulders with Flat Earth guys. You're going to rub shoulders with, whatever, Hitler didn't die in, the 40s. He went on and made a base, and his head's like in a jar, like in Futurama or something. But,
yeah, that's the fun in it, though, right?
But yeah, well, see, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you take it too seriously, that's where it gets janky. Because first of all, I don't believe in much. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm not a ghost hunter. I do paranormal investigations. Some write about paranormal, but I don't know what is out there. I know it's an energy, and I think everything is based on vibrations. And I think, be it your energy, your spirit, your chi, whatever. And, we've seen how different patterns affect the human mind. Why would it affect other things? So, it leaves it open for, where did they learn? Where did they learn their craft? Where did they get their technology from? And we're actually going to talk about that in just one second, and hit it back with Mr. Josh Schmitt right after this break. Robert Riggi, a Peoria, Illinois native, is a psychic medium with over 50 years' experience within the paranormal field, in addition to the 35 years' experience as a forensic psychologist. Robert has been involved in 2 exorcisms, both sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago. Riggi is a mentor of 10 children of the paranormal, instructing them, teaching them in the ways of their gifts and their talents and how to use them most wisely. Robert volunteers at a hospice ministering to the children and their families, seeing to their needs. He assists these young children in their transition from this earthly dimension to the heavenly dimension. Mr. Riggi's mantra is, we are all spiritual beings in a physical body. Robert Riggi talks to the children about the angels that are always around them in times of need. All of the services he does are always free of charge. Robert's available for both public and private events. He has given many readings in person as well as over the telephone. Mr. Riggi has been on many podcasts, such as House of Asher, Trevor John Touched by Heaven, as well as several programs in the United Kingdom. If you need any assistance or information concerning anything paranormal, he urges you to please contact him at 309-213-0325.
This is Beta Callisto with Trauma Team. You can find me in Shakespeare Shitstorm, and you are listening to House of Asher.
And welcome back to the show, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the music. That's from a band called Camo Trooper. Some buddies of mine, and hopefully you dug it. Josh, as we were getting ready to go into the break, I was wondering, what do you know or what do you speculate? And again, because there's nothing been proven concretely one way or the other. Do you think that the technology that was lost in the Mudflood was terrestrial, or do you feel that was just something from an ancient race, or do you think that was maybe sort of like a trade back and forth from some other race or technology or vibrational plane, dimension, whatever you want to call it? Where do you think it all come from, or do you think it was just something that, given enough time, we're gonna what's the old saying? Put 100 monkeys in a room, one of them write Shakespeare.
Right. Yeah, Joe Rogan had a good one too. It's like, put a guy in a forest, and how long until he comes out with a cell phone?
Yeah, I love Rogan, man. I love Rogan.
Yeah. My personal speculation is, I think all the tech we have now was stuff that was stolen from the previous civilization. I don't know where they got it. I don't know how many times this has happened over and over again. Like, is this just a Game of Thrones that keeps repeating every 200-300 years? I don't know. But I think the tech has been here the whole time. I don't know what to say if it's terrestrial or not. I don't think it's alien per se, but it definitely may be something that comes maybe from an interdimensional, like an energy source or knowledge or something, something above us, whatever you want to call that.
Well, I had started writing up some stuff and trying to pull it together and go, okay, well, look, here's some proof, this is what is said. I don't go at it as like, this is definitive proof, this is definitively this. I'm saying this is what's believed. This is what's being presented as evidence, and you make your own choices. But one of the first things I know was they were talking about was it St. Petersburg Cathedral that supposedly Peter the Great, made this grand cathedral, and it was massive and architecturally just advanced, especially for the time and everything. And but then you see like pictures where it looks like it's half buried in the dirt or the mud, or and this is supposed to be a new building.
Yeah.
And how do people explain that away? Also, you look at different places like in Seattle and well, even places in the Midwest and just all over the place, in different parts of the world, and even in jungles and whatnot. And I understand they say, well, after X amount of years, you have a certain amount of dust and whatever, and just build up. Right. But how do they explain streets with nobody in them? And we're talking large cities. We're not talking about some little podunk town, off in the Midwest. We're talking larger cities, places like Seattle, St. Petersburg. At one time, I think hosted a lot of people. Have you had anyone kind of get on and disclaim, on the site? Because there's always going to be somebody who wants to troll you, just for the fun of it. What, devil's advocate, what could they say that might actually work? Is it like, well, because of this time period, this is what's going on, or, what is some of the disclaimers saying in regards to that you can think of that either would carry weight or you can explain off?
The most common we get for the empty cities, I guess, would be that it's an early morning shot. But usually you can look at the shadows and estimate what time of day the photo was taken. But even still, if it's a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, I mean, there's still going to be people out milling around in cities of, hundreds of thousands up to millions.
Right. Well, I mean,
that's very, very bizarre. Yeah.
Well, I mean, show me any town, even if it's the weekend, you're going to have, people driving wagons, delivering goods. Back in those old days, they probably were delivering whatever, ice or different sort of goods. You don't deliver to a market at most people back, especially back in the day, at like 10 or 11. You're going to be delivering before the store opens or shortly as, cause then they want to be dealing with their customers. So you get there at closing time or before, in the early morning. That way they can have the fresh produce out, and especially in that time when refrigeration was more of an issue. So to me, that kind of negates that, so it makes it kind of, well, okay, maybe a few pictures, but all of them look like that. And
another one is the exposure time. Because of the long exposure times back and at that time period, that you wouldn't be able to see anybody because they would have to stand still. But even then, you'll see in the old pictures, you'll see like a ghosting effect.
Like a smear.
Yeah, smear across, yeah.
Right, and I guarantee, say you have 400 people walking around, no one is going to walk in lockstep and not stop it, maybe look at their watch, stop for traffic to go across. And so I mean that's also out of the water. And look at the people. Have you ever noticed people back in the old days, and I thought maybe it was just some hard Dust Bowl kind of southerner kind of vibe, nobody smiled. Everyone looked like they had just went through hell, man. And I understand, disease and stuff, and life was harder, but that was their normal, I was like, these guys look like, all right, you ever seen like pictures of like Dresden after World War II and different bombed out areas of like Europe after World War II? I know I'm throwing out like World War II, but that's closest thing I can think of about destroyed buildings and damaged buildings. You can tell their spirits are crushed. You can see that they're trying to recoup some of their humanity, some of their whatever, and it's the same sort of, expressions of the few that you may see out there. This is not you have this wonderful new structure, something like the St. Petersburg Chapel or Cathedral, and all these different monuments and different things made in all these different cities, mudflood cities, as I call them. But you would figure there would be a celebration. What a Advent, what a marvel of the time, and they look like they just lost their puppy, Yeah. So it's something to be said. But go ahead, you were giving some more points.
Yeah, now that you mention that, I can't think of any photos of the 1800s. You just see the photos of families, and all the faces are just blank. Yeah, good point there. Interesting that you mentioned Dresden, though. I don't know if you've looked into all the great fires that have swept across America between 1700 and 1900, but it's almost like the war for Tartaria never ended. And these cities, if you look at pictures of, for example, look at Dresden, what that city looked like after World War II, and then go look at pictures of San Francisco after the San Francisco fire, and then look at pictures of Hiroshima after that bombing, and they all look exactly the same. All these fires from the 1800s and 1700s, it's almost like an advanced weapon was used on these cities, because like when the World Trade Center turned to dust, it's like these stone buildings just turned to dust and rubble from a fire.
Right.
Well, it doesn't make any sense.
Let me throw this out. People go, and I've wondered it myself. Okay, if we had a massive kill-off, where are the bodies? Where are the massive graves and this and that? Well, if they use something like a neutron bomb, there wouldn't be any people. And if nothing more, they would probably be some of that dust that's all over those buildings. And so it makes you wonder, because if you talk about like the Seattle, where they talked about the Great Seattle Fire down, what was it called, like Lumber Street, or it was like most of that town was made of like wood in the early days because it was so easy to get, and but all the structures that were at the level seem like they're not burnt. They should have had like burnout timbers, all the glass should have shattered, all the different, but there's no sign of that. It's almost like that was already covered up. So was that already there? Was that pre Mudflood? Then a fire happened in an attempt to get rid of some of that, or did that just happen? I mean, you can kind of speculate and roll it around in your head in a lot of different ways. But like you said, Chicago fire, the Seattle fire, the San Francisco fire, and it's almost like, well, this is a handy way to kind of clear this out.
Yeah, Boston got hit with, I think, 3 fires just in the 1700s. Montreal, New York, Detroit, New Orleans twice, Buffalo, Savannah. I mean, even the Civil War cities. I mean, you look at the pictures of the Civil War in the South. I don't know what cities those were exactly. Like Columbia in South Carolina and Richmond, Virginia. I mean, those cities,
places like that.
Yeah, they look like Dresden. I mean, what kind of weaponry were they using?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, and that's kind of the rub of it is that if it happened in one area, you could say whatever. I mean, there's mudslides happen in Ecuador and places all the time, right? There's in the South, because we have so much clay earth, mudslides happen here, rock slides happen here, but not in that degree, because if you look at, which, I mean, I don't know if you're a particularly religious person. I'm not, but people talk about, well, there was the biblical flood, and everyone said, oh, there's no way, that's complete BS. There's no way that the waters of the earth, whatever. Well, then they showed where, like, looking at the different levels of taking, like you said, core samples and stuff. Oh, there had been a great surge of this and that, and this looks like a lot of silt from the ocean and whatever. And then they find areas that didn't have water suddenly had all these sea anemones and all the different little creatures that live and muck around in the dirt or the soil and the mud of the oceans were all over places it shouldn't have been. You know, and so then you have to look at it like, well, if they've got that wrong, how much more are we getting wrong?
Yeah. It's a mystery, you know. Every time I feel like I'm getting closer to something, then something else pops up, and I'm just like, well, that turns everything else upside down again. So,
right.
It's a baffling subject, and it's like you said, like when you look at some of these pictures, especially when they call them street leveling projects. They did one in Seattle. It was only like 10, 11 years after the Great Fire. They're undergoing this massive project to remove these giant mountains of dirt, and just blows my mind. You know, even when you look at all the buildings that were built in Seattle after the fire, it makes no mathematical sense. It was physically impossible. They were building, like, on average, I think 10 or 11 stone buildings per day after the fire. Like, how do you do that? Like,
it's not possible. I mean, even and if they had that kind of massive die-off as well, or a reset, I mean, you wouldn't have the manpower. You know, short of having some sort of advanced technology, building technology, construction technology, whatever. It's just, yeah, it doesn't make sense. You know, what if, and this is way out. Again, talking about vibrations. What if they used a weapon that displaced all those, like a very large number of people, into like a parallel universe? You know, maybe that's where, well, there's no bodies. Maybe that's why there's no signs of this and that. And like you said, you know, they kind of had the fire as sort of a red herring to kind of go, oh, well, that explains it. Don't look any further into it, you know. You know.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
People want to look at this subject like it was just one event that happened at one time, and there may have been, you know, one major event, but the more I look at this, it seems like there were just these pocket events all over the place, just almost in succession, and it's hard to fathom, you know, what was really going on here.
Well, that's what happens on, like, as researching kind of not quite Earth killer, but definitely extinction level events and very, very hard hits for humanity events and things, or even before humanity. A lot of those, you know, eras like Pleistocene era, this and that, it wasn't just like a bam boom, there it is. It was a slow kill. It's like, you know, whatever eruptions go off, it takes out, you know, fills the clouds, no sun's getting through, like more or less a nuclear winter, slow icy kill off, this and that, which may have taken who knows how long, you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of years to complete the cycle. I think because what we can comprehend is like, boom, okay, here it goes, and you know, it's like a clean cut. And I don't think more often than not it doesn't work that way.
No, I mean, I wonder, you know, I hear the word harvest thrown around sometimes, and maybe that Earth itself is some kind of almost like a terrarium or a housing farm for humans, and then they grow the population up to a certain point, and then they reset it. They harvest the humans for God knows what, or for what purpose, I don't know, but and then they probably can terraform the Earth any way they want. Because I've seen maps that show the Sahara Desert as a lush, you know, tropical area with rivers and cities, and you know, so there have been major Earth changes just in the last 400 or 500 years.
Right. Well, that makes me think about, like, you know, like sometimes people will put up maps of, you know, when people had visited America, you know, so far back, and there was even a show I'd heard where they had conjecture about the ancient Chinese had visited America like a long time ago and had made maps, and it showed it was so different, you know, just, you know, a couple hundred years or so back, before, like the Vikings and especially the Europeans hit. It seems like you said, it was it was just like something happened to the point that it shifted deserts to, or whatever, oceany areas, very fertile areas to desert. And short of like something hitting the earth, I don't see anything that's going to do that quickly.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's your take on that? What's your take on these maps where it shows just the layouts are so different of even America, much less elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a tough one because cartographers, I mean, that's like their art form. I mean, for me as a musician, I mean, I wouldn't make a song as a joke or something that was false. I can't imagine a cartographer making a fake map. I think he would draw it to, the best of his ability, and you see those similarities, but some of these old maps, they line up very well today. So, I mean, it's I don't know. It's something major is happening like every few hundred years, it seems like, and changing the maps completely.
Well, I don't know. Again, we are famously amnesic, if that's a word, about our own history. It doesn't take but a handful of generations to more or less, re-educate people on what may have happened or may not have happened. And you know how it is, man. If a handful of people believe it, and a handful of more people believe it, and they push it, especially if they put it in a book, it's fact.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. They talk about the giants and stuff and things that were recent. I'm talking, Native Americans have stories about this. People visiting America from other places talk about these large races of people that were here before the disaster. And I'm not necessarily talking biblical giants, living human giants. I'm not saying they're Nephilim or anything like that. But when you have all these different accounts, but then you kind of go, well, that's just, mythology. And I was like, okay, but that wasn't that long ago. It's not like you're going, 800s, 900s. This was, maybe 500 years ago.
Yeah, a few hundred years ago, yeah.
Right, and most of these people were pretty, I guess everybody wants to go, well, that's an allegory for, no. Everyone's given the same physical description of these creatures, maybe, 6 fingers, 2 rows of teeth, or whatever.
Yep.
It's, I don't know. I mean, it does really seem like either believe it or don't believe it, but they really don't want you to believe it. Or if they want you to believe anything, it's either tied directly to a biblical quote or not. So it's so crazy, man. You can't win with a lot of people, because even having these sort of conversations, because I've talked to some friends of mine, and they're like, no, man, that's crazy. They had this and that, and they had the Renaissance, and they had this and that. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but we did have massive die-offs. Yes, there's all these photos of these half-buried buildings, windows in the ground. I mean, I'm talking standard lift-them-up windows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, well, it's settled. I don't think it's going to settle that much. And it's all it's all over the world.
Yeah, when you have buildings that are excavated and there are doors 6 feet below the ground level, I mean, you don't build a door to open up into the dirt. I mean, something happened.
Right. Which, and then it also opens up concepts of underground passages, which also goes back into kind of mythology and people living under the earth. I'm sure you've heard like the I'm blanking. Was it the Navajo that believed that there's a race of ant people that when there was a great cataclysm, they pulled them underground and they protected them until it was time to come back up. And
that's a weird one. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you talk to some people and it's like, yeah, there was a lot of peyote floating around. I was like, yeah, okay, but you're going to find hallucinogens in pretty much any society on some level or another. But
did they describe them as ant people, or was that just an analogy for them being underground?
They kind of, the way I understood it, kind of described them. Their bodies were kind of segmented and kind of hard,
Okay.
I can't remember if they had antennas necessarily. There was a okay, this is me being random. There was a movie that had Crispin Glover and the guy who played Dr. Johnny Fever, and there was a movie called Reuben and Ed. It's a real cult film, man. It's going back. It was made in the 80s, and for whatever reason, Crispin Glover went into a cave, and I guess he took a bunch of peyote and saw all these drawings on the wall, and he found all this old stuff about the ant people. And so he's coming out, I'm the king of the ant people, and all. It was funny, but it makes me think back to different things. How much do you think in media that they're going to try to let any of this out, or at least explain it away? Maybe to go, oh well, okay, well, yeah, well, something like that happened, but what happened was our version, where you're still going to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, they'll spin it, their way, whatever it'll be, they have to. But I don't know how they're gonna argue against all the photographic evidence. I mean, it's pretty astounding at this point. Why do you build a hospital with 20 steps going up to the front door? That was a hospital in Detroit in the 1850s.
Yeah, well, exactly. And again, that's where you're left with a lot more to eat. You know what I'm saying? You think you kind of got a bit of a grip on it, and then all this other stuff comes out. I'm going to be really excited to see where study on this goes, and if it maybe leads to another, extinction event that we don't know about.
Yeah, probably will. I'm starting to lean towards maybe one in the late 1600s as well.
Okay.
But that's I'm just speculating.
Well, I'll say this before we get too close to the end, and I do real quick. Give the site name for the Facebook group.
Okay, sure. The Facebook page is it's facebook.com/Mudflood. It's called Mudflood and Hidden History, and we have a group on there called Mudflood and Hidden History Researchers. And so it's just like-minded people trying to figure out what's going on. Right now we have over 2,400 members, and we just started the group, I think, in December. So it's growing pretty well, and having some good discussions.
Well, what I dig about it is, you can have like-minded people and a room will stagnate. Or you can have people who are so varied, they're trolling on each other, and you're going to have a little bit of trolling anyway, but for the most part, everybody is open to the other people's opinions or conjecture, and it's sort of like all are welcome. Let's look at what you got. What's your theory? Oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, maybe I don't adhere to that, but I can see why you would, or maybe whatever. There's not a whole lot of flaming, and that's really what I love about the group, is that it's pretty much a safe place for people to talk about this and not get caught too much in politics. But let me ask you this before we get down to the end of this, Josh, and man, I appreciate you being on. Would you touch a little bit on the orphan trains?
All right. Well, they're very, very bizarre and strange. Basically, orphans were put on trains and shipped out all over the country, basically given to families that would take them. It almost seems like they were taken to put them to work. But you have to ask, where did all these orphans come from? It seems like they were just kind of taken from their families that couldn't take care of them. But then you have to ask, why couldn't the families take care of them? It just brings up more and more questions. But they just seem to coincide with these empty cities, almost like they were rebuilt from an event. And okay, here's the new people. Let's start over. So very strange, for sure.
And where did all those new people come from?
Yeah, I don't know. Some people think they were underground, getting ready for the event. Some people think they were just stolen from their survivors. I don't know.
Well, let's look at that for a second. Are those the people who are now in power? Are those the people that they said, okay, we were getting a little too far off this and that. Okay, we need to tweak this. boom, there's a die-off. Oh, hey, there's these other people that's coming in to do this and that and reestablish whatever, and these great leaders, real charismatic folks, and maybe even a certain bloodline if you want to get really conspiratorial, and why don't we? So who's to say, man? I mean, who's to say? I know, like I said, I know I'm going kind of deep with it, and I apologize if it's too much, but never say never 100%, because truth is stranger in fiction, right? And you're at the end of the day, you have to at least look at. If you don't look at all the evidence and everything, you're not looking at it subjectively, and you're not getting everything its fair shake. And then I think that's when, again, you get muddled down into one thing, or you just lose track of it. And I think it's what frustrates a lot of people. They end up just dropping the bone and walking off because either it doesn't meet their expectations or what their paradigm is, and that's unfortunate. You got to be open to this kind of stuff. That's what research is all about.
Yep.
Well,
yeah, that's my favorite thing to do, is destroy my paradigm.
Well, you need to. You got to be shaken up. We get in our comfort zone. We're creatures of habit, and you know what I'm saying. Was it Spaghetti Tuesdays or whatnot? And everybody kind of falls into that. But you got to keep your mind active, and you got to keep growing, and you got to want to strive to learn and know more. Let me ask you, what's the? Do you have anything else planned for the group? Are you looking at doing maybe doing some appearances, talking about this? You really should, man.
Yeah, I've got a couple other interview requests. I've just been real busy with family stuff right now. But yeah, I'd like to a bit about Mudflood a little more. I guess get the word out, see if people are interested.
Man, I tell you, I've got some good friends, guys like Richard Serrett, and he does his own stuff in conspiracy theory, conspiracy channels, and he co-hosts on Coast to Coast, and again, Solaris Blue Raven, and just a bunch of different folks. I can drop a bunch of names. I'm not trying to be that guy, but I can definitely put you in touch with one of the people, because they know when I'm excited. I'm like, man, dude, I just had this guy on and blew my mind, and it was really, really cool and laid back. Now, sometimes you talk to people and it's just like this, and it's like, oh God, and the information may be very good, but they're just not. They're not public speakers, but that's not you.
Right, yeah.
You've got this, but Josh, man, I guess we're right about at the end of our thing. If you'll stick around, man, I'm gonna. I'm telling you, it goes that fast, and I want to have you back on to get more into it. And what we'll do is try to set up another thing here, and probably in the next few months, and I can talk to you more about that offline. But I do want to say thank you again for being on, man.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Everybody, there it was, episode 89, Mudflood Theory. Almost said something wordy dirty because I get cotton-mouthy, but Mr. Joshua Schmitt. And I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you guys for coming, and check it out, StevieAsher.com. Check out our House of Asher page. Check out my new book, The Hauntings of the St. Vincent's Academy, shameless plug. You can get that on Amazon. Keep up with Joshua on his site on Facebook. He will be back. But I want you to go out there and enjoy that sunshine. Enjoy that beautiful day, or even if it's a cold day. And appreciate that sun, because as it settles and the shadows grow long, make sure to check under your bed, in your closet, down the back hallway. You never know, there may be some stray Chitarian wanting to come throw some weird freaky deaky death ray at you. Who knows? But don't be afraid to be afraid, because in fear sometimes is knowledge and learning. So until next time, everybody, love yourselves, love each other, and don't be afraid to get a little scared. So long till next time.